Good morning, everybody. How are you guys doing? You guys are more awake than I am. Susan was nice enough to tell me that I'm starting in the wrong office building this morning. Well, just the wrong title. We got into the right office building this morning. Good morning, Susan. Good morning, Shakti. So today we're going to start with a charcoal from our class reference. And this will be nice because this is more of a start. Sometimes in here we tend to do a little more advanced. So we're going to start at the beginning and look at a charcoal drawing, and then at the end of the program, or the second half of the program, I'll look at an interior oil painting of an interior. So if you're just joining us, my name's Jason Meyer, and this is Morning Jumpstart, not Master's Work. My apologies for that title. Mishap. And what we do here is we look at students' work and we look at what possibly we could do next and any suggestions or ideas we can have. So as we go through this, I ask questions, and to get the most out of it, I want you actively participating, right? Actively engaging in your brain. What do you see? How would you answer that? This is good, or I would improve that. Now, you don't need to necessarily say it all in the comments, or especially anything negative. We're all at different levels and doing our things, but we love encouragement. And if you have any questions or whatever, you can feel free to ask those. Okay, but as long as we stay positive and supportive, we're okay with moving forward with everything. So, I think we've covered it. Why don't we get in? Miss Cindy Myers here. The woman who makes it all work somehow, some way. Boom. Miss Magic. All right, let's see. Let's add a little bit of this. Swing your partners round and round. Let's do-si-do. Here we go. Oh, that's a little much of Jason, don't you think? All right, so this is where we are. And before we get started, I want to pause and show you what the reference that we're working from. And again, this goes to show is we never want to copy, we're always creating. Okay, we're always creating. So this is the reference we're using. Let's talk about this just a second. So I suggested that if this was your first time and you weren't familiar with this, that literally you see the ginger jar and the little clementine here. And start with just that, because that's a basic spherical form, and then we can build out from there. Okay, as you get more comfortable and move along, what we want to do is, rather than just simply doing individual objects, the next step is to see the painting as movement. Right? So there would be a lot of nothing coming in, and with a little something will form into the grapes. We'll build, we expand, we expand, we expand, we hit the top, and we come back down. Okay? So at least that's one idea that I suggested. Something I did not get to say in class, but I think is a big part of this. I don't think I said it anyway. This is the start, but look at this as it's basically a dark, right? But what would we call that? A vague, non-specific dark that then comes in and becomes specific through our shadows and cast shadows, right? So this dark can also work its way through the painting. Can you see that, how that happens? And then again, the grapes are dark. I know it looks light, but we're assigning dark there to it. So the dark is like non-specific and grows to more specific as we go over. More or less. More or less. The light, now again, I'm getting a little advanced, sorry. I get excited about this stuff. But let's leave that there for today. And tomorrow we're going to take this whole thing up a notch. But today, we want to start here at the beginning. At the beginning. Let's see, we had some more joiners. Mr. Tom Dawson's here. Tom, good to see you, my friend. Claudia from Cambria. Wonderful, Claudia. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You're too kind. Well, thank you, but I don't think so. Maybe too wacky, but too kind. I don't know. Let's see. All right, so let's come back to where we started. So some things that I love about this is she's done a great job at gradating the background. Okay, so that's really nice. One point on that though is you see the stain of the canvas is a little lighter. I wouldn't let the background get lighter than our light. Right? You know, maybe this one depending, but definitely not here. So I would make sure to get just enough gray on there that this guy wins. Winner, 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 chicken dinner. Right? There's no question about it. So something like, then the other thing we want to do, and again, let's be clear here. Let's start with, right? Remember, we're going to have a number 4, which is what? Which is this. And that's our number 4 value. And then we're going to have lighter than our dark, a gray. That looks a little dark too, but I'm going to put it that dark so it shows up for right now. But we may make it a little lighter. But you see that's lighter than your black, dark. And again, I've already decided that's too close. That's too close. So let's get a little more room between those two. There we go. So number 3 is this value. And then number 2, actually, it'll show up since there's already gray here. Number 2 is just the tone of the paper. Let's do this, because that way the white will show up. And what we're doing here is we're setting up 4 distinct values that we can work with. And then, of course, number 1 is white, and we want to make sure that So if my white doesn't clearly come off of that, then that means my number 2 needs to be a little bit darker. And I don't, well, we'll leave it for right now. So what I'd like to see here is just a little more separation between your the darks and the grays. So when we start, we want to be a little more obvious about things, right? And then finish is where the subtlety comes in. But when we start, we want to get everything, you know, dark is dark, gray is gray, because it's important to check our patterns. And so why you want to get those in there so that you can cleanly see what's dark and what's light. It may not be as sensitive as you like it, but it's still important. It's a little bit thick. That's a little bit thick. Come on, Jason, you can do better than that. You can do better than that. How'd you guys like to ride around with this guy on your shoulder all day, huh? There we go. Oops. I see it. All right, here we go. And then we talked yesterday too. This drawing will have a lot of rounds, and then there's grapes in here too. The leaves are more or less round. So one thing we can do to get a little difference is to take, they're small, but I guess they're still limbs and twigs and stuff. And if we make it just slightly more jagged and hard edged, that'll stand out from the rest of the painting. Okay, now again, that's an artistic, creative choice for you to make, but I just wanted to point that out because that's one of those kind of abstract underlying things that could make a big difference. Right? And then what if, well, we're gonna have things here too, but the other thing is if we just saw that twig through, you see what we've done is we've expanded this dark shape from here. It's expanded out to there and onto the leaves here. Then it'll hook up here. Just some ideas there. Okay. And then if we did take our number 2 value, how are we doing? Let's look up here. See what's happening. Miss Janny says, good morning, everybody. And Wendy's here. Good morning, Wendy. Good morning, everybody. So now let's take this. And like I said, I just want to make sure that this is brighter than our light background over here. Okay, we want to make sure that that this ginger pot's the winner, right? That he's the one eating the chicken dinner. So nice and even, be soft edges there. We'll come back and restate that highlight. So if this is the top plane, the top plane running across here. Okay, and then, you know what? I think I'm gonna darken this a tad. The reason being is I want to go lighter on the shoulder there. Oops, did I mess that up? Yeah, come on, let's slide on down there. Slide on down there a little bit. About slightly darker, slightly richer. Yep, that'll work because look how much lighter is in the background, and that's what matters. Because it's our number 2 value, it needs to be darker than our number 1 value and lighter than our number 3 value. Right now our number 3 is getting a little close there, but that's all a matter of taste and what you want to do. But as I make that a little richer, what that's going to do is that highlight will stand off a little stronger. And this can seem like a harder surface, which it is. And then down here we're going to mix some of this with gray. We've got to soften some edges there. This is a forward-looking plane, the same as the belly that I just painted. Then from here, let us slightly lighter, slightly grayer, can show the shoulder. The top. So those are the top planes. And then the bottom down here, as we turn into air, what we can do we want to soften all of this. Soft edge. I don't like that tool that I picked for that, but we're gonna stick with it. Where did our number one, oops, where did our number one value go? So the highlight's got to happen in off the center. And then if we go up, right, if we trace it up right there, that's where the next one will be. Then since this is straight, we'll go straight up. Something like that. Okay, now all of this was about not making this too light, and it's still lighter than that. So, easy enough, huh? We can just go knock that down a little bit. Oops. How far back is that dark? Oh, well, maybe too far back there. Let's see if we can cover that up a little bit. A dark arrow. Let's see if we keep this. No, don't let any light. Oops, a little lighter there. But you see how now we're going in? Well, if it wasn't for that, we'd be going in there. Okay, and especially if we were a little more graceful, like she had been in the background. All right, I was a little rough with that. A little rough. Let's see if we can't gray that off just a bit. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then what I wanted to do is what you do from here. So for instance, I would start trying to expand the dark. Expand the dark, what the heck does that mean? Well, you remember number 4 that I just took out up there is our dark. Well, we're going to represent grapes by the dark. So I could make a grape not butt up against the side of this, right? We want to avoid things touching like that. Instead, we want things to definitely overlap. This is definitely in front of that, or definitely behind it. Okay? So here, if we make sure that we have one grape just kind of cutting this, and I also want to make sure to leave a little negative shape here. So I'm actually going to start with that and then build my grape off that negative shape so that I can make sure to have that little bit of light there. I can have another one there if I want. And then we're going to go off into mystery here. Go off into mystery. We're okay to do that, right? You guys brave enough to march off into a mystery with me? I gotta change that smudge tool. That's just not acceptable. Not acceptable. I'm sure he's a very good-hearted tool, but not getting the job. There we go. There we go. Right, so how are we going to make these grapes mysterious? Right, because we talked about those grapes emerging out of the back. Well, what does emerging look like? We know you have fun saying it, but what in the holy heck does it look like? Well, let's see. Let's see. So we've got this vague dark happening back here. And let's just go ahead and all right, we got to set the stage. That's really important. That's really important. You know, this vagueness back here. And we're going to let it get a little bit lighter around the grapes so we can see them. Don't give them anything to look at over here. Oops, do I got to come back? Maybe we can get rid of it. Soft, 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 soft. All right, like you're holding a baby. Okay, then what you want to do is if you just go slightly darker than that, and then if we, again, get rid of a couple of those edges, then let's go slightly darker again. Maybe there's another grape sitting up back there. And then we can drop into an, oops, a little large. Drop into a hard edge, maybe right there. Let's get a good negative shape there. A good negative shape. This first one here, cast shadow on the orange, cast shadow on the ground. Then we can go back and even get our quote-unquote white. For a little highlight. Okay, so something like that is what I mean by emerging. Okay, I hope you get a sense of that, right? And then if this guy is this tone, what if we just make this one here a bit weaker? Maybe a bit weaker. Another way we can make it weaker is just to make sure the edges are a bit soft, right? We just don't want a strong visual impact. See, white will be a strong visual impact. Don't want that. Okay, and why do we want, we could even go darker down there. Why is that? Well, that's surrounded by a dark that the other one isn't. See, so at what point do I lessen the clementine down? Does the ginger jar become the absolute winner? Does that make sense to you guys? And it's a test. It's a test. How close can I get that? Because again, the clementine should emerge. It shouldn't jump out and scare the living daylights out of you. But it should just emerge, right? From down the street at night. Oh, here he comes. Waiting on our friend for dinner. Here he comes. So you see how now that has so much less impact. And so we're slowly, and then something very specific. We need to keep these edges, but just keep that quiet a little bit. We're leading, and then, woo, we found the party. Party, people. All right. So I hope that makes sense, but I think this is an excellent start. You're doing exactly the right thing. But even at this stage, after you get a sense of form, and I feel like you've got a decent sense of the form, might take a little practice. Let's get a little darker here. But this whole exercise right over here of making this dark, and then out of that darkness, how quietly can those grapes emerge and then sit here, right? And then can you keep all of that in check so that this guy wins? So what you're doing, instead of going from individual object to individual object, very quickly you're thinking about this part of the painting versus this part of the painting. In other words, you're seeing bigger things. And if you can work like that from that bigger things, from the beginning, from the very beginning, you're going to save yourself a lot of heartache later on. Let's see. The brain is an interesting organ that will make us smile. I love it. That's exactly right. So Susan says the brain's an interesting organ that'll make a smudge into a grape. And that's where the viewer participation comes in, and that's where they have so much fun. Yeah. Yeah, maybe a primal, assuming. Yeah, the amount of assumptions that our brains make is incredible. And our level of ignorance to it is also incredible. Our brain is making assumptions and things at a crazy, crazy rate. And art's kind of learning to see through that, in a sense, right? Or learning how to control those things. So again, thank you so much for sharing. I know you're already way beyond this, but I wanted to use this drawing at this stage because it was so instructive, I think. And there were, hopefully some people got some good stuff from that. Okay, any questions before we leave this and go on to the interior? Oh, I didn't finish that thought, did I, Susan? Yeah, where you survive by assuming even a smudged shape in the shadows might be a predator. That's right. That's right. And it's interesting. You hear some of these old landscape painters and guys. When I say old, I don't mean that disrespectful, but I mean it very experienced, been doing it for decades and decades and decades, and they just understand how things work. If you see a group of trees and bushes and everything on a hillside, and then the form of a deer, man, you see the difference between the tree and the deer shape instantly, if they're clearly separated, right? The same with, like you said, a mountain lion or a big predator or something. Whoo, you're going to see those really, really quick in comparison. Now, the mountain lions stay hidden pretty well, so you don't see. But anything of a different nature immediately grabs the brain. So if we have no edges here, and then suddenly we have a smudge and catch even the slightest edge, like you said, your brain wants to know, is that a predator? Is that a predator? Or maybe food? Is that food? Right? What is that? It was more than curious back then. But anyway, that to me, that's such a fun idea to play with, and so much more interesting. Again, when you start just need to get the form and everything down. But then as you go on, very quickly we want to talk about movement. You're always seeing always seeing faces in art pieces. Yeah, well, and I think from what I do know of you, you're very much a people person, right? It's what we're attracted to, and we happen to see more than not either one, what we're attracted to, what we want to see, or two, what we're afraid of. Right? We're definitely, those things are going to make our adrenaline go up just a little. Okay, so let's go to the interior here. So we talked a little bit about this, and she worked on the bread. We talked about focusing on the bread here. And so this is an example, is straight from our last lesson we can come into this one. And what were we talking about on the last charcoal drawing? Right? Do you guys remember? The first thing I said was we want to make sure to clearly separate shadow or number 4 value from our background. Okay, so we want clarity there. So let's see, let's go from charcoal to oil paint here, huh? We got to do that even digitally. Sounds like I added a few extra syllables in there, huh? I think I might have. All right. So I'm going to do this like this because this is exactly what we were talking about yesterday, and some people having trouble with the shadows. So that bread, challah, will have nicer shadows. Oh, I hear you. I hear you right through the computer. Out of your seat. You've already spilt your coffee, throwing your hands up in the oh, that beautiful color. What do you do? That beautiful color. You're killing my color. Ah! I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. You know, first off, if you're actually getting up and throwing your coffee, maybe change that to decaf. Going a little intense on us there, all right? So that's step number 1. But then step number 2 is, remember I talked about just adding a little bit of color. Little bit of color. And this is, and I think why your shadows were light, and this could be a wrong assumption, but it looked to me like you were trying to get that little bit more color in there. We're not going to lighten the value too much. Right? How much does it take? Like even that, right, will feel a lot better. But look how clearly you see that light and shadow now. All right, so we have some definition. And again, we want to, if you're going to do one or the other, overshoot at the beginning. Don't undershoot. Overshoot. All right. And then from there, the other thing we have to establish is this white rose. So I have a choice here to make. And so this choice would depend on, just like the clementine versus the ginger jar in the last painting, what do we got here? What do we have here? What do we have here? Well, ladies and gentlemen, in this corner, let me present to you a very light rose sitting on top of a dark. And up in this corner, we have a literal flame. 2 flames to be exact. So we need to know what kind of relationship are we going to build beyond from those guys to these guys. And let me give you a little hint. If these guys get equal, that equals war. And I don't know about you, but I think it's a pretty idea to avoid war at all, if not all, at most cost. Right? And how are you going to prevent war here? Well, for one, either this or this, you're going to decide. You, the artist, the creator, not the copier, the creator will decide which one. Now, probably, in my mind, and if I'm reading a novel and I get started and I'm just getting introduced to some of the characters and everything, I don't know if I want the climax of the whole novel to happen in the 3rd chapter. Right? Usually I like to get a little more emotionally involved in the story and see what's going on and boom, the ins and outs of all of it. And then somewhere near the end or at the end is when we figure it all out. Right? Usually after the end, they're going to let us down just a little bit. Rather than coming to the very climax of the novel, of the work, and then just saying, that's it. Right? So, for instance, could you imagine an opera singer just, at the very top of the note, just boom, everything's built, the drama and everything, silence, walks off stage, curtain closes. Well, geez, that was a little abrupt. Come on. Thank you so much. That's very nice, Susan. It's very nice. And I don't know. All right, let's see here. So, if we're thinking that way, and I'm not saying that's the only way to think, but that's one way to think. If you're thinking that way, then what we want to do is build and maybe have kind of a mini crescendo here and let back down, and then maybe start building again and building and building, and the music and the tension and the drama, and then it all comes to a head. And the thing is that is so much more fun to paint. And okay, now here's the end of the candlestick, here's that. Not only is it so much more fun, but the paint you use to paint that idea is going to be much more exciting. Right? And I could be wrong, but I don't know if like the most boring painting is ever really the first one to sell at a show. I don't know that that's how paintings sell, is by how boring is it. Okay, so let me get a little bit of reference here, and then after some talk, let's get to work here. So what are we talking about? All right, unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show you the reference right now, but we'll work for it. Basically, these 2 candlesticks are even in the reference. I mean, the flame, the candlestick, the holder, the size. I mean, they're even. And the first thing she's done, and I think she's done a good job of it, is break up that evenness so that the candles could be a more dynamic part of the painting. right? Because look how much more dynamic that is. And even, you know, all of that rather than just being even. So good job on that. Good job, good job. And since we're going to have that candle flame up there, right? It'll have a little bit of a warmth next to it. I'm thinking we need to set this up, and we're going to set this up with the background. Right, so that background, if we make sure, did we talk about maybe this being an orange-blue painting? Did we talk about the color concept? I don't remember. Well, it's a triad or orange-blue, whatever it is. We're going to go down here to a gray, and we're going to take that maybe all the way down to a gray. And then I'm going to let this be a bit darker up here. Right? And the reason why is because it'll be much easier and appear much stronger of a light and a glow from the candle if we've got a little bit of darkness up here. It doesn't have to be dark, dark, dark all the way. We can start walking off of that a little bit. Maybe even a little glow in the background there. Walking off just a little bit more. Right, so even this, right? So the first thing we want to do is get this white covered so we can see the impact of our white rose versus the impact of our flames. The light, right? The light, the light, the light. That's what that candle's all about, right? Or, well, of course it is. Of course it is. I don't think I'm making assumptions. Unless you're planning on starting a fire or something, and you just don't strike me as the type of person that is going to use those candles as a fire starter rather than a light. I could be wrong. Again, I don't want to make assumptions, but let's just say, so something like that. And background is background, so we don't want hard edges. So we want to make sure that those are all nice lost edges back there. Right, so what I'm doing here basically is setting up for that candle flame. You see this? We're putting the stuff underneath so that candle flame, when it comes out, it just looks spectacular. Oh my gosh. Who dresses you? Isn't that what they say? For the fashion designers. Who are you, or is it, who are you wearing? Right, we got to get that question. We got to get that question. We're only going to do that, right? They're not going to get that question at the diner with their baseball hat on, right? And not all done up with their hairs, right? 7 makeup artists working on you for 2 hours. Right, so that's what we're doing with the background is we're setting it up. We're rolling a red carpet. We're getting backdrops. We're putting people in stands. We're making this seem like a big deal. Right? Because if we're nonchalant about it, if we're just asking them at the diner, well, that doesn't seem like a big deal. All right. And then we want to be quiet. We want to be quiet. We want to be quiet here. You guys see where I'm at? Why do we want to be quiet here? Well, remember we've got a candle over here somewhere. So between here and here, this has got to win because that's the candle, and we're going to go up that way. So that is where I'm getting the color I'm getting for the candlestick right now, because it's so close to this background it doesn't make a lot of noise. Okay. And then for our other candle over here where we do want to be, we'll go ahead and let that have a little more. Oops, a little thick. You see how it's a little bit lighter, but it's also against something that's a little bit darker. So between here and here, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Now as we get up here, we want to come back to this side, don't we? With the flame and everything. Okay. So, what if we put a dark? What are you doing? You're trying to draw a flame? You know it. You know it, sister. Here we go. All right, wick. Whoops. The wick, the wick, the wick. And if we come back to this blue, the bottom of that flame. Woo! A little bit big. A little bit big there. All right, and so that blue's a little bit strong. We just want that little hint of blue at the bottom of the flame. And then it almost goes clear. And then we can't just put white down, we've got to set that white up. And I'm making this flame more interesting than it actually is in the reference, right? I mean, why not, huh? Again, do they sell the most boring paintings? All right, then from there, a little more yellow and lighter. By the way, this is the first time I think I've ever tried to paint fire, so let's see how this goes. And then, woo, boy howdy. That white hot center, huh? White hot center. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Well, have you ever seen a candle flame without a glow? I haven't. So now I'm just going to step off the white again because I want to get a glow here. So that means almost an imperceptible value changes, right? And we're going to work from white through yellow to orange. Okay, so anybody, what do you guys think? Am I getting close to flame here? All right, yeah, we hadn't talked about color, Wendy says. Okay. Well, you know, when you're dealing with an artist, I try to be as consistent as I can, but sometimes we're yanked about a bit by the muse. So when we can, what we can. But you got to be open to the muse and what's coming and what's going, right? So I don't want to get this too messed up. And I feel like I don't quite have enough color in there yet, but let's see. This may be more about just about glow of that background. So again, kinda, but what's the issue? What's the issue? Well, it's the glow. It's that background glow, and it's a little bit of that orange, right? Let's go darken that a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is ever so slightly, I'm just going to put some of this around. And then we're going to blend this basically like the halo effect there. Oops. Let's see. See if I'm mucking this up too much. Yeah, you mucked it up too much. So what are you going to do? But look, we're starting to get a little more interesting, right? So sometimes it's not just about one shot and you're done. Not about one shot and you're done. So this time, why don't we walk up from or up to white? And I want to get a little more color on here. Around this outside. Then from there, let's let it start going a little more yellow. There we go. But you see it'll tell you, it doesn't hide its feelings. Okay. And then let's take just a bit of this. And again, we want that halo, that little bit of glow around here. Okay, so now I'm not going to go so far to the outside, but I'm going to do the same thing again. This time slightly heavier. All right, how about one more time? Right, sometimes you have to wrestle with some of this stuff. It's a little, you know, the material's got to be right and everything. It's not a gimme. But don't fight with it, talk with it. Don't get frustrated, get curious. Why didn't that do what I wanted it to do? Ooh, why did it do that? That was very interesting. Right, be curious instead of frustrated. It'll make your journey a little more pleasant. Okay, now we're getting there, aren't we? We're getting there, except for these hard edges. Except for those hard edges. Right, so that constant gradation without the hard edge is part of this. And then if we come back and we do some warm, cool things too, which I'm not going to get to today, just because of time. We're coming up on an hour here, so. But I do want to get this to a somewhat of a, you see how that's building there? And then what else could we do? Well, we've got that candlestick there, right? The candlestick, well, what happens? That thing's got a top plane that's facing that light. Maybe lit up probably, right? A nice soft transition there. And then after the light, what comes after that? Well, the blanch. We need a little color in there. Okay, so does that make sense? So we'd have to get that in there. And then we're out of time, but let me give you some suggestions. I know this was a lot. So darken the shadows a bit. And then down here, you see this white is so powerful? We need to find we're going to keep it warm, and that way it won't be as different from the other things on the table, like the bread. But we can gray it off just a little bit. Do you see this? And since it's kind of it's warm, but it's gray, it almost reads as a green. It'll, one, let that bread show up, being orange, and two, not grab your attention too hard. because we've got to be pretty specific about where we want them to go. And so since this is generally warm, what I might do then is come up here with this cool. And again, it's going to depend on impact and your idea, all of that. But if I make that white rose on the cooler side, it's going to have a lot of impact, or it'll have more impact. Now, I haven't got a shadow or anything on there, but we're just purely looking at impact. Versus if we made just a slight warm. I mean, you see, but you see that slight warm is a little bit quieter. And since we do want to finish up here, with the white here, I might lean it a little bit warm. But again, even this needs our shadows. All right, so where are we going to put that shadow? I want it warm, but it's also got to stand away from the bread, right? Okay, one last trick to finish up the day here. So we said, is it about this or is it about that? Well, right now this is pretty strong. So how do you weaken that? Well, one of the things is simply edges. And then the other thing is how solid and big these light spots are. In other words, a red like this is going to be much brighter and carry much stronger than a smaller red with a softer edge. Do you see that? So that's all we're going to do here to control our flower, is we can decide on what size we want it, right? How big that needs to be, and then how soft those edges are. Now there's still some relativity, but you see how I just knocked that down? And maybe there's just a small fraction of that initial thing left in there. Again, don't take this as, you know, finish. This is exactly how you're doing it. I'm just trying to suggest how you might find some of those colors and tones. Right? See how that's quieter? And then you can decide, is that quiet enough or not? Or, you know what, that's so loud now. What I've got to do is I've got to come over here and turn my music up a little bit. Because what does that do? Well, it makes that white flower not quite so strong. Because now we've got some strong color in that area. It's going to spread the focus a little bit. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And of course, let's see. Back at the very beginning here, we put these things in without softening our edges. Like a bunch of ogres. Oh my goodness. Where did we get our manners? Where did we get our manners? All right, so if there's any last minute questions, let me know. Let's see, it looks like I'm missing a few things. All right, Wendy, not yet. Okay, I agree. Susan, I haven't seen teacher. Yeah. So thank you guys. Thank you. And you know, that's an intentional thing. I was extremely frustrated with my arts education. And yeah, a little bit of time, a little bit of apprenticeship, right? I want, if somebody seriously studied under me, I want it to show in their work, right? I will, oh, well, of course you did, because look, you're a solid artist. I love seeing Build the Flame before. Yeah, the flame's a sensitive thing. You've got a big, uh, you got a big row to hoe here, Wendy. And you know, I'm not trying to discourage you, but just realize that this is it's going to take a little bit. Right? It's going to take a little bit probably. What's going on here? I should be having that color. Oh, I see. It's a layer thing. What layer are you on, man? There we go. There we go. And then again, if we need to turn this up more, how do we do this? How do we make this even louder than it is? Well, then you remember that yellow part we were at? Come crank that up. Now the question is going to be measure. Remember the orange part? Crank that up. Right? And it'll start to come to life a little more. You got to watch edges and everything. All right, guys, we're coming up on an hour 10. I think we better call that a morning. I got my own work to do, but thank you for being with me. I'm all nice and warmed up, ready to jump into my activities. I hope you guys are too. So you know what to do, right? Go be beautiful, and let's create some stuff. Love you guys. I hope to see you back. I'll be at Sketch Club tonight on Facebook at 7 o'clock. Come join us for some cloud sketching. Bye, everybody.